Hi there, and welcome to the Bloom Show. This is Sahid, Nahim, your host. The Bloom Show is brought to you by New Bloom Solutions and Above All Flowers. We're a business solution service agency concentrating on business development, networking, innovations, and many other things. But one of our mottos and our missions to help the flower industry innovate, connect, and bloom. And therefore, the Bloom Show came up. And the Bloom Show is our way of connecting the flower industry because we believe that the more information we have, the more perspectives that the flower industry has into an insight into other companies, into each other, and connecting people through our show, we can only become a more successful, industry and all, right? So it's super important for us. Before we go forward, I want to remind everybody, if you like the show, please subscribe, like, share, comment, press the little alert button, and you won't be sure not to miss another episode. Pretty exciting to kind of mention a couple things. I just kind of want to do some housekeeping here to mention a couple things. This year, we are changing the format of the Bloom Show. And what we're doing on the Bloom Show is that we're opening it up to guest hosts. Our real goal is to help others connect. So that's why we're opening up to guest hosts so they can connect with other people that they would like to interview. So we're basically giving it back to the industry. I'll still be a host on certain events, panels, news alerts, things like that. But it's truly an effort for us to continue to connect the flower industry together. So we're excited to do that. And I'll share with you at the end of the show who our guest host is going to be. And I think you'll be very excited. So today we have a special guest, Saralyn Revello Bliss. What an awesome last name. Saralyn Revello Bliss is the Director of Merchandising for UrbanStems. We are all aware of UrbanStems. We know what they've done and how amazing they've done within the industry. I've asked them on, and especially Sarah, to talk about product procurement, the issues that they've had, just a bunch of questions that we're going to have, but really to inform us and to look at it in e-commerce, not as our, that other type of industry, but something that we could be curious about, learn from, and learn how to work with these companies even closer. So I think that that's very important. Please feel free to ask questions. As you know, this is for our audience. It's for the community. So feel free to chime in and ask any questions. So help me invite Saralyn Revello Bliss, great last name, onto the show. Hello, Saralyn. How are you?
Hey, how's it going today? Thanks for having me.
No, thank you so much for being on and taking some of your time. We truly appreciate it. And again, we hope that people will ask questions, and we really hope that this will be informative for everybody. But thank you so much for taking your time with us. So, Sarah, explain to us what you do for UrbanStems.
So I'm the Director of Merchandising and Product Development. I do the assortment plans for the company, choose the bouquets, choose what we're going to offer across all of our product categories, and help build the end-to-end product lifecycle.
So when it comes to that, it's a little different, can we say, doing that for an e-commerce company versus just a regular bouquet making company? Can you say it's a little different?
Oh yeah, it's definitely different because I think one of the things in the industry that is really particular to e-com is setting the expectation with the customer and making sure what we're showing on the site and what gets delivered to the customer are fairly in sync. Normally, customers purchasing in person, so they could kind of touch the product, see the product, they know exactly what they're getting, or if they're sending it through a florist directly, the florist will talk them through it. We kind of have to do all of that work in the few seconds that we get of a customer's attention. So it kind of creates a unique environment.
Okay, cool. So let me ask you, so let's start here. Tell us about how UrbanStems all started. I know we know the story, but I think it's really cool because it was people outside of our industry, right?
Yeah, in around 2014, the founders were in, I believe it was a long distance relationship at the time. And, they needed to send flowers to each other. I don't remember the exact story behind it, but I think someone was mad at someone, or maybe it was a happy event. Maybe it was an anniversary. But long story short, someone had to send flowers to the other, and they sent it. I don't remember what service they used, but ultimately the expectation and the reality didn't quite meet up. So the founders, they saw some room for technology and innovation within the industry, and they decided to start UrbanStems with that in mind.
So then I guess that goes into the question is what makes UrbanStem unique? Because that's someone else's problem. Like everybody kind of has that problem sometimes, right? How did you solve that problem? What makes you unique as UrbanStems?
Well, what makes UrbanStems unique from a customer standpoint, I really believe, is our aesthetic. We really cater to a younger audience, an urban customer, but someone who also, is maybe time constrained and wants to share sentiments of how they feel with someone in a different location. And they utilize UrbanStems to do that in a way with an aesthetic that resonates with them. So we really focus on what the product looks like, having sort of unique product mixes, and it takes quite an amount of effort internally to make sure that translates to what the customer receives when they open that box.
Gotcha. And that just takes a lot of follow-up too, right? Because in education.
Absolutely. Some of it's about setting the preface with good imagery on the site, being really real about what the product might look like when you open the box, what it might look like a few days later, things like lilies, things like peonies, things that when you're shipping it direct, it might come closed, and we do that for a reason. The reason is longevity, product quality. You don't want to be sending open flowers in a FedEx box. So setting that expectation with the customer from the beginning and having them sort of have a bit of understanding as to what they're ordering and whether it kind of fills the sentiment they're trying to share with their loved ones and friends.
Fantastic. And then where do you see the biggest need for specific products from companies such as UrbanStems?
So one of the things that I always try and push, especially because we're so aesthetic driven with our product, is more unique ways to mix product. I think the way that we source product currently, you can source a bouquet pre-made, and there's a wealth of that coming from bouqueteras in South America. And a lot of other companies will do a lot of the mixing in-house, whether it be wholesalers, florists, and trying to solution around better ways to have more unique product mixes, mixing product from different origins. I know it's kind of a pain on the importing side, but solutioning around that and having, I would love to have more pre-made Dutch bouquets that we can do. We could bring in pre-made and not have to mix that product in-house, ways to scale that and ways to do it in cost-effective manners so that we can send our customers the freshest product. It at least kind of touches on the way from the farm to the customer, but also unique mixes so it doesn't all start looking the same across the industry.
And how do you maintain, if you could share, again, I should start getting curious, so only share what you can. How do you maintain that? How do you keep it fresh? How do you always get a new unique design and recipe versus kind of just tweaking the last one? How do you avoid being too repetitive?
Well, that's something that I hope I'm able to bring to the table with UrbanStems. As a little bit of background, I've been with the company just about a year, partially in consulting, and started as full-time director of merchandising about 6 months ago. So one of my biggest pet projects has been re-recipeing a lot of things and making sure that the recipes are both from a customer expectation reliable, but also scalable, so that if we're showing a fairly particular rose on our site, that 95% of the time that's the rose you're going to get, or one that fits within a range that we consider to be close enough that wouldn't bother the customer. And there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of monitoring of QC, both at farm level and through our facilities, as through the distribution channels, and just making sure that how we recipe it at the beginning is really, really crucial to setting that full expectation. And so, because I've been in the industry long enough to have some preferences there, and I know how product ships and what roses do and how lilies open and all of those kinds of things, it helps me to be able to build recipes that ends up being they set the expectation both on the front end selling side and then with the customer when they receive it.
And like you were sharing with me, and we kind of take it for granted, but the basics of a hydrangea, some will melt and some will become dry. So it's really cool to know that you're actually looking at the specific traits of a flower to understand what to ship, correct?
Absolutely. Hydrangea is probably one of the bigger ones because, like you said, some of the hydrangea does not perform well when it's not consistently hydrated. And during the shipping process, we can only keep it hydrated so much. So making sure that we're picking varieties that can stand the the length of time that it takes for the logistics to get from farm to customer and any touches that may have to happen in between. So that's part of it. Roses is another one. I have particular preferences on roses just based on my own experience of how they open and head size and all of that kind of stuff. The same thing a florist would have when they're taking care to do their ordering. I do it the same thing from an e-com perspective.
And I think that's super important because all that's going to reduce your returns and increase your repurchases, right?
Absolutely. That customer expectation and how it performs when they get it are everything. It makes the biggest
and picking the right flower to be able to produce that right product that's going to last long helps you in keeping your business going.
Absolutely. It's a balance between picking the right flower, but also something that's scalable and something that we know we could get on a large enough basis to match the expectation that we have on our demand side. So it's definitely a balance.
For the long term. And then what is the biggest pain point for e-commerce companies such as yourself? What's something that the industry really, takes for granted or is not looking at? What's one of the biggest pain points that e-commerce companies?
Yeah, as I touched on earlier, I think the biggest pain point is really setting those customer expectations, because I think one thing that gets taken for granted in both flower shops and grocery and other avenues of buying flowers is that customers are buying it, sight seen. So they know what they're looking at when they're purchasing it. Whereas on e-com, they're buying off of a picture. And, I've been in the industry since 2004. So I've lived through a lot of, customer expectation versus reality type of situations. And
Yes.
The floral industry, to be honest, does get a little bit of a bad rap on the e-com side for delivering inconsistent quality and inconsistent recipes. So that's been one of my challenges, is really making sure that what we're showing is what we're delivering. And if we find a change in recipe mid-cycle, we have to reshoot it. We have to set that customer expectation so that when what they get is what they think. I think back when I started in 2004, 2005, it was a little bit easier to sort of get away with sending whatever was available because there wasn't as much connection between the customer and the recipient. So the person buying it may not see what the customer receiving it was getting.
Okay.
However, now everybody's FaceTiming, they're all Instagramming everything. But so the way social media has evolved in the last, 15, 16 years has made it so that you send a product, even though the person who received it might be like, oh, thank you, I got your flowers, they're great, and send a picture. And, that the person who received it might be like, oh, this is great. But the person who sent it then is seeing that and they're like, oh, that is not what I sent. So, managing both ends of the spectrum and the entire life cycle from both the selling side and the receiving side, and making sure everything in between is pretty tight is probably the biggest challenge that I see specific to e-com floral. It's like, imagine you ordered a pair of shoes in red and you received that same pair of shoes, but it was just blue and nobody told you that's what you were going to get. That's not acceptable. Yeah. For some reason in floral, it's been kind of like, the thing we don't want to talk about with e-commerce that actually happens quite often. So I'm trying to mitigate against that. And, that one of my journeys has been to make sure you're getting close to what you see in that picture.
So the evolution of that has really developed into it becoming a bigger thing and easier for the customer to review and say, oh, that's a white hydrangea, not a blue one. I want my money back. Wow.
Exactly.
So what tips can you give, if you can, again, what tips can you share that would negate that would help get that path, figure that out for companies?
Well, I think customer education is key. If something is going to be sent as a grower's choice, that has to be really explicitly explained to the customer in ways that they could ingest, which is hard because, the amount of time people spend on online shopping and reading isn't that great. So I think the floral industry has some opportunity here to sort of be more storytellers and be more educators and utilize technology for that. I think that video, TikTok, all of like the younger generations social media are great prime opportunities to teach customers more about floral. And I don't think it needs to be even company specific, like that this is sponsored by UrbanStems, which I think is great for our specific products. But I think in general, the industry could just use a lot more customer education. People should be a lot more excited about flowers in the US than they currently are. And I think that's an industry-wide problem. I don't think that's really specific to any company. I think that's something we all need to tackle together in our own ways. But I'd love to come together, with more industry knowledge and just figure out ways we can solution around that and get customers just more knowledgeable and more excited at the same time.
I think, I don't know if you've heard of it. That flower feeling is one of those that's kind of doing their thing. Have you guys seen that? Cool. That's I'm a fan of it, and I'm also a fan of the floral board as well. I think that any initiative to create more awareness and more education as an industry is super important. I think I have a question. Let's see. Oh, this is Miss Mimi. Mimi from Chrysler saying that flower feeling, just doing a shout out for that flower feeling. Thank you, Mimi. So I guess this question kind of hits on the last question you answered. Where do you see the largest growth potential for the flower industry in general?
So there's two sides to my answer there. I think one hits on what I was talking about earlier in terms of mixing product and just having more unique mixes out there and available to customers. I think that on the industry side, there's a big opportunity there. I think on the consumer end, education and storytelling is going to be huge. Aside from just educating people on specific types of floral, I think that we need a lot more industry transparency across floral as a whole. And that's something I've always pushed for since I've been in the industry, is just like more transparency into where your flowers come from and the awesome stories that go along with that. I think e-com is really primed to be storytellers there. And I don't think anybody has really tackled it as well as I think we could. And I think there's tons of room and opportunity to be storytellers. You know, one of my favorite things about floral is going to farms, visiting them, learning about why they grow, specifically what they grow. Because, you know, a farm might grow 15 things, but they might really love growing 5 of them. And when you learn those stories, you can sell those stories. So I think really learning about like, you know, why a farm is growing what they're growing and being able to translate that to something that a customer might be interested in. It's kind of like what the produce industry has done with like heirloom apples and fruit and vegetables like that. I learned a lot from working in grocery, where they were telling those stories about perishable heirloom fruits and vegetables. And there's so much the floral could do there to tell the stories about these products. I mean, floral is so interesting and so amazing, and people really love, and they have a lot of emotion around it. And we need to just be telling those stories and getting that information out there to them, because I think that would be exciting for them to be like, oh, I didn't just send you peonies. I sent you these particular peonies because they come from here. They're not usually here during this time of year, but they are now because this farmer decided to try it in this location. I just think that there's great stories surrounding that customers would love to hear. And, you know, we can all do a better job of telling those stories.
And is UrbanStems doing that on their website? Is that something that you truly have a team that's creating those stories, or how does that work?
We do have some content around it now. It doesn't hit every one of our products because of, you know, the sourcing differences across different product types don't allow us to do it for every single product. But we've done it, let's say over the summer, we did it heavily with Alaskan peonies. And I'm a big fan of Alaskan peonies, and just the quality of them are fantastic, and the story around them. If you ever get a chance to go on the Alaskan peony tour, I highly recommend it. It's it's eye-opening. You learn so much about how they can actually grow peonies in like the middle of central Fairbanks, Alaska, where it's, you know, there's permafrost all year round and they only get so much light during the winter, but peony plants actually love that. So it's pretty interesting. And we just started doing that basically this past summer, specifically with peonies. And, you know, there will be more of that as we kind of onboard more vendors that have those really particular stories.
That's cool. And you're right. Stories are great. Let's see, I have a little comment here. Stories are great. Some of ours are peonies we sell are over 100 years old. Wow. Thanks, Dave. If anybody will know that, it's Dave. Dave's close to that. No, just kidding. Thanks for the comment, Dave. I'm gonna hear from him. That's my business partner. So he's gonna be complaining to me in a couple of minutes. But so yeah, that's true. And all these products do have stories. And I think we've also seen it with farms creating more stories about their employees and their environments that they work in. And like you're saying, and I think that after COVID, we've seen that increase. We've seen that growth. That storytelling is super key.
I think it's interesting because, you know, we do so much on the customer end to say, oh, send flowers to convey this emotion. But we don't do a lot in the industry to talk about all the great things that are actually going on the farms. Like, you know, in California, we have these farms that have all these creative ways of saving water and, you know, reusing water and all those cool stories. In South America, there's amazing stories about how farms are helping people's lives and things like that. Like all over the world, there are all these amazing stories happening. And I just think as an industry, we could be telling them so much better and connecting that to customers and connecting them to purchase habits.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of opportunity
again,
there.
a story pulls at the strings, right? So a story connects you to something. So having a story that can either connect you to a product or connect you to a farm or connect you to Urban Stems, then it's just there's a value added there, and that's why it's so important to have blogs and have different channels that you get these stories out. It's not just a sales team. So do you guys? Now I'm just curious. Do you guys have a full sales team?
Well, we have a sales team on our business to business side, and we have a full e-commerce support and marketing team on our e-commerce side.
Gotcha. So you have that e-commerce side and you have business to business. And what does the business to business part do? Again, only share if you can. I'm a curious cat. So what does the business to business aspect do?
It's businesses looking to, it's primarily gifting across business to business. So if you're like, let's say you work in HR and you want to gift all of your employees something, those kind of things where it's more bulk ordering around gifting.
Okay.
Gifts that companies basically want to send to their employees. For the most part, things like that fall into that. And there's a range within that.
So corporate gifting, basically.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So final question. I know this is a little trick question, but we kind of do this in the beginning of the year. So if you're a January guest, we ask you, what's one word that defined the flower industry to you last year in 2022?
Community.
Community. And what's one word that will define your rest of the flower industry year this year in 2023?
Well, it's two words. It's innovation, but it's also working together. So it's kind of pulling those things together. I really, truly believe that there is room for all players in this industry. I think we all have unique niches. We all have unique strengths, and there's room for everybody to do their best at what they do. I think gone are the times where we need one company to do it all. I think it's important that we learn to make room for each other and work together to get more. We need, especially within the US, we need more Americans buying flowers on a more regular cadence. It's not just about Valentine's. It's not just about Mother's Day. We need to keep promoting the everyday purchase of flowers and conveying your emotions that way. Because, it always kind of like bothers me when I see memes on social media, like, oh, she doesn't want flowers, she wants this. And it's like something silly, like whatever, it's like, it's a silly meme, but I'm always like, what? And I always respond every time, why can't it be both? Because that's how I feel it should be. Flowers should be more ingrained in our, like in society in the US than it is. And I feel like Europe is a good model of that, because in Europe, there's just so much more regular giving of floral. There's more consumption, more regular, just having it in your house to have it in your house. So, keep the air cleaner to, make your day brighter, and just like the personal care and mental health aspects around having flowers and plants in the home. And I think that there's lots of opportunity there to increase that. The only way we're going to get there is community. No one company is going to own doing that.
And that's why I'm a big supporter of both initiatives, right? So that flower feeling, that I'll give Mimi another shout out, that flower feeling, and also the floral board, I think that people are kind of like, oh, I don't know what, but it's something. And the momentum, even as you and I spoke, the exponential growth that we had in the flower industry right during COVID, that's a momentum. So let's continue to support any of these, because that's a momentum that we have the opportunity of losing. Why not grab a hold of it and continue to educate? So we make an effort with that flower freedom to kind of share throughout all of our channels on a monthly to weekly basis to just get the awareness out there. Let me get a question here from David, my co-host, does UrbanStems sell any fair trade products?
We do, and I would go out and say we probably don't do a great job of marketing it currently, but we do. We buy some amazing growers that do amazing things within the industry and have the certifications. It's just, and that's something I've struggled with in all of my touches with e-com over the industry and over the years. I've had problem conveying fair trade to customers. I find that interesting, and I think that there's a lot more work we could all do, especially e-com, on presenting that in a way that's digestible to our customers and making it an important selling point. So that's a great
like you said, storytelling, right? It's about just telling that story correctly. And then we have Tattooed Poet, love the name. Thank you, Saralyn, for your knowledge and transparency. And then we have David Kaplan again coming in. Love your outlook and thoughts on the flower industry. That's awesome. Cool.
Well, thanks so much.
Thank you. No, Saralyn, thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate it. I hope you had fun. Thank you. You know, it's 25 minutes, a little short, but I hope it was short and sweet for you. And I know that there's value that you brought to the table to kind of giving some insight into that world of e-commerce and UrbanStems. So again, thank you so much, Saralyn. Truly appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. And I look forward to continued collaboration. And, you know, any way that we can bring the community together, I'm all for. So feel free to reach out as needed.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Saralyn. I'm going to put you back in the Bloom room. Take care. Bye-bye. So thank you again to Saralyn for coming in and giving us some insight of how UrbanStems does their thing, and also explaining what, you know, the future looks like for them and how important storytelling is. I think that we as B2B businesses might forget that the story that we tell our customer is a story that customer will tell their customer, and then it'll continue to go on and go on. So one idea that I've done is creating content on some of our wholesalers' Instagram or social media, which is telling a story about a rose, the meaning of a rose, or the meaning of color, or a story from a Greek heritage of where the peony came from, for example. So those stories, we would not really brand it, and we would send it out to our customers and let them share it as well. We basically say that stories sell. So we'd educate our florists on how to sell a peony or how to sell a yellow color, et cetera, et cetera. So wholesalers could do this, farms could do this. It doesn't only have to be an e-commerce company doing this. So again, thank you to Saralyn for joining us today. I do want to mention that we are doing the Bloom Show again this month, but we're going to have some special guests. So I'll show you who will be the special guest, but guest host, right? So I won't be involved. I'll come in, do a quick little introduction, and then I'll take off. And our special guest host will be, let me show you. To be doing this because again, we as New Bloom Solutions and All Flowers want to give it back to the Bloom Show, back to the community. Let the community have it, let the community do guest hosting, and let them connect with others. So this is an example within their company of an employee interviewing another of one of the managers. But as we go on, we're going to start doing some cool collaborations almost with guest hosts interviewing even competitors, things like that. So we're super excited to have that rolling out this year, and we really hope that you get to enjoy it as well. So please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. Always gets us hyped up when we get a new subscription. So please hype us up. Take care. Have a wonderful week and enjoy your January. Happy New Year from Above All Flowers and New Bloom Solutions.